Thank you all for being here. My name is Dave Diley, and I oversee youth arts programming at somewhere called the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm along with Jill Wiggins, who is a teaching artist in our programs. So real quickly, I'm going to get started by just giving you a couple minute kind of foundation of our organization, and then we're going to move on to how we're incorporating some of these new technologies in some of the traditional arts that we've done for the last 40 plus years. So start with the first slide, please.
Yep.
So the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, this is our digital arts studio that you're seeing here. We've done youth arts programming in the visual arts in this facility since 1987. Most recently, and I think we're about 3 years in, we've added this space, which we call Tech Suite. And it's an addition to our traditional digital art studio where we added both 3D printing and laser cutting and engraving. So that's what you're looking at there. We also teach photography, both traditional film, black and white film photography. So the old, to these kids it's like ancient, but what you see here is them doing some digital as well. We also teach, I call the foundational arts in a way, painting, drawing, printmaking, all that good stuff. And we do ceramics at a very high level as well, and you're going to find out why shortly. This man is Frank Ross, and as the story goes, our organization comes from one young man in high school, and this young man's name is Bill Strickland. Bill Strickland tells the story that he would walk to school each day through his neighborhood, over broken up sidewalks, by boarded up, dilapidated houses, overgrown yards, by individuals young and old that seemed to have no place to be. He said, whether I knew it or not at the time, this told me something, that this is what the world had to offer, and it wasn't much. Then he goes on to say, one day I was walking down the hallway of my Pittsburgh Public High School, Oliver. I looked into a classroom and I saw this. I saw this man shaping and molding clay on the potter's wheel. So he walks into this room. He's not supposed to be in that room. He doesn't have that class. It's in between periods. Everybody knows what happens when you do this. You walk into a classroom, address it, what are you doing? The answer typically is, what are you doing? You should go there, leave. That's not what happened in this case, and thank goodness, because I wouldn't be here today if that was. Frank Ross looked up, saw this young man's enthusiasm and what he was doing, and said, I'm making a piece of pottery. Come back after school, I'll get you signed up for my course. And why that's so important, why what I just told you, this story is so critical, is because Frank Ross looked up and saw a young man, a young black man, that had excitement in his eyes for something that he was passionate about. And that's very important to the story. So more than just the process of ceramics, Frank taught Bill and his other students many things. So this is a young Bill Strickland here in a photo at one of the early Three Rivers Arts Festivals that happen annually in Pittsburgh. So there he is, this young man doing a demonstration. Bill was so moved by his experiences with Frank Ross that as soon as he graduated from school, he started going to college at the University of Pittsburgh, but at the same time, he acquired this row house in his neighborhood and got some pottery equipment and started to teach people off the street. He said race relations were terrible in the 1960s. He said, I'm telling you, with the tensions between black and white, Martin Luther King assassination, all these terrible things are happening. My solution to this was, come and let me show you ceramics. So this is where it starts, humbly. 1968 was the year it started in that row house. 1987, this was built. Bill's dream art center. And it was really a grassroots effort to have this built. He would say, I'm a poor kid from the Manchester neighborhood. How am I going to have it? He would go out and knock on doors. He'd go to Hines, 57, and say, I'm Bill Strickland. Can I speak with Johnny Hines? And they'd say no. And they'd say, I'd go the next day, and they'd say no. But he said, if you just keep going back, sooner or later they'll hear you out. So he did this with all the major corporate leaders in the city, plus the political leaders. And he said, I know you guys can get something done. Art changed my life. We should build this center for the community. 1968 till 1987, it lives. So this is Bill's idea of what a school for poor people is supposed to look like. So no metal detectors, no cameras in the building in one of the highest violent crime neighborhoods in the city, Manchester. 1987 till today, beautiful artwork on every wall, no writing in our bathrooms, no gum under our tables. You don't get that lucky, is what Bill would say. You don't get that lucky. Why? Why is that? Because we're driving a culture of dignity and respect. So the three core principles that were really taught by Frank Ross are environment shapes behavior. Beautiful environments create beautiful people. And that's what you're seeing in this art center. Everything from the natural handmade art furniture to beautiful artworks all over the walls, from many of the world's best artists that truly came through as visiting artists. So we got Akio Takamori's work, we got Jun Kaneko's Dungos, we got Faith Ringgold came and made quilts with the kids. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. Second principle is every individual is an asset, not a liability. Demonstrated by Frank Ross when he looked up, saw passion in a young person's eye and said, let me share this with you. This changed my life, maybe it can change yours. And the third is that creative imagination fuels enterprise. So you can do that kind of sounds a little confusing to me. I'm always like, oh, that's a nice way to sit. But I feel that how we work with the kids, it's really that creative imagination is going to be the solution to the complex problems of the future, truly, and we all know that. So that's my 2-minute story. If you want to find out more, you can read this book that Bill wrote, and it's also a book on tape you can download. So Make the Impossible Possible, and it's really about his personal journey that I just described to you, and how art really changed his life. And what's really exciting is Bill narrates his book if you do download it on a tape, so you can't separate Bill from his passion when he's reading this. So it's really something to hear. So.
All right, so it's my turn to talk for a little bit. I'm going to share 4 different areas of. So here's how it all started. We spoke a year ago, and we had just had our grand opening of our tech suite. So what we're going to talk about now is kind of what we've learned over the past year, and we're going to cover a little bit about like staffing and some of the requirements. And so if you're thinking of starting a program at your school or at your facility. We're going to talk about like some of our experiences with staffing, some education resources for 3D modeling and printing, advice for brand new people, and some of our best practices and the outcomes with our students. So first of all, who should be leading your program? So 3D modeling, for those of us who didn't grow up with it, it can be a little overwhelming at first, and so there's certain qualities that a person needs to have if they're going to be successful. So people come to us all the time. They say, "Who should we hire? Should we hire an artist? Should we hire an engineer?" And I mean, either is a good choice. But what we know is that if you're going to hire an artist, they need to be able to work on the computer. They have to be very, very skilled in computers and not afraid. If they're an engineer, they should come in with some kind of a design focus or design background. So kids, a lot of times, you can kind of really get them passionate about 3D modeling and printing by kind of appealing to where they're headed. Like if they want to go into engineering, 3D modeling is such a big part of engineering now. If they want to go into the creative animation and design, then 3D modeling and printing is always used there. They're going to have to know that. If somebody's going into the medical field, tell the kids, it's being used all across the board in so many ways in the medical field. And everybody knows about prosthetics, and now they're 3D scanning people's organs, and then they're printing like a grid, and then they're growing the cells to grow a new kidney, and then they transplant that, and the grid, the 3D printed grid, then dissolves and is absorbed by the body. So it's just incredible, all of the things that they're using it for. And then 3D printing design. We happen to have a place in Pittsburgh called 4 Moms. That's the number 4 and then MOMS, and it's a high-end. They make high-end baby things like baths and strollers and
Like really high design, self-collapsing, folding, like really
it's
cool
pretty.
stuff. Yeah,
It's really
neat,
impressive. Yeah, and so we take our kids down there, and they're using one of the printers that our kids use, a Stratasys 3D printer, to do prototyping for parts for their strollers or their baby baths and things like that. And so 3D printing is in so many places now. So the person that you hire for this job, or the person that you want to put in a position that's going to be doing 3D modeling and printing with the kids, has got to be a do-it-yourselfer. They have to be. Like, these things just don't work typically without problems. There's so many problems. And eventually one day we're going to be able to buy a printer, and we're going to be able to set it up, and it's going to work. But it's not really that way right now. So
Not yet.
So the person has to be a problem solver. And the reason I put this up here, I don't know if any of you were here last year when we talked, but the poster on the left over there, we brought one of the Ultimaker printers, the white one on the bottom left. And so Ultimaker printers are pretty nice printers. They worked great when we first got them. And then what happened was the filament feeder on the back, that's the black piece at the top. I don't know if you can see, there's pink filament. And it just chews up the filament eventually. So I could never get a print higher than this, because it would just stop, because it would break the filament. And so we loosened the tension then on the feeder, and then it wouldn't feed. So we tighten it back up, print a little bit, break. And so it's a bad design. And so the cool thing about the world of 3D modeling and printing is that everybody's out there sharing ideas and answers to problems, solutions to problems. So the feeder down below, I found, somebody designed it, I printed it, put it on, works great. So these are the kinds of things you have to deal with. And so, I mean, you could always pick up the phone and call your 3D printer phone support. Not. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Most companies don't even have a phone number. You can probably post something on their website, a question, and then they'll get back to you. But yeah, if you want 3D printer phone support, MakerBot, they have it. I think when we bought our first 2 printers, it was about $3,000 a year for MakerCare.
And we
Who's got that?
And we had just spent maybe nearly $20,000 on some printers. So it wasn't like we have a $1,000 investment and they're not answering the phone. It's like, yeah. So it's very interesting. I mean, you can assume certain things, but that's typically not the case. Support is very challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, so anyhow, so that gives you a little background on personnel, or the kind of people that would be really good for working with these applications and equipment. So some education resources that we find the best. Autodesk, and if you've been in here for any of the other talks, Autodesk has been talked about a lot in this room the past few days. And Autodesk makes free applications. We use their whole suite of free applications because it's then they're available to the students. The students can download them at home. They have free cloud-based savings so they can have an account on the cloud, and they can basically open the models anywhere. And so the programs that we use the most by Autodesk are 123D Design, and that's a solid modeling program where you usually start out with cubes and spheres and toruses and cylinders. And then we also use Tinkercad, which is internet-based and very user-friendly. But Autodesk has a fantastic YouTube site that has great little videos, and it's nice because you can do a search on a specific thing. Like you can say, I want to take a 2D sketch, revolve it around an axis, and make a vessel. And you can find a 2 or 3 minute video that tells you exactly how to do just that. So they're very specific videos, they're very helpful, and they have tons out there. So some of the other problems that you run into in 3D printing that you have to figure out and deal with are like nozzle clogs. That happens a lot. You'll find that having things like a metal paper clip in your toolkit is really helpful. So yeah, you find out that there's all these little tools that you need to have handy when you're dealing with your 3D printer problems. Filament feeders, they do fail, not just the Ultimaker. We'll talk about another filament feeder soon, and I'll explain a little bit about that. But poor print quality. So there's a lot of places on the internet that you can find great PDFs of, they show pictures of failed prints or poor prints, and they tell you this is probably a bed leveling problem, or this is under extrusion. And so there's a lot of help out there. And then the bottom one I love. We've seen a lot of those. So the interesting thing about 3D modeling is that when you're in the software, you don't always think about things like, is the model sitting on the grid? Especially when the kids are working on them. They grab the models and they just drag them all around in space. And sometimes I'll go to print them and the model wasn't actually on the grid, so it's kind of floating in space. So if the software that communicates with the printer doesn't offer you the option to put the model on the bed, and you start printing up in the air, it's not going to stick to the print bed. It's just going to dribble all over the place, and then you end up with a pile of spaghetti. So, and I noticed that somebody actually left a pile of spaghetti over there on their table. So it's something you'll see when you start 3D printing.
Well, to that point, if you don't watch, we learned quickly, many of these prints can take, like hold up one of those dies there. Like we printed, I mean, this could be 5 hours of printing. And if you don't want a pool of spaghetti, you got to watch these things, or they'll just, sometimes oh, I'm going to go get lunch, and you come back and it's doing something totally different than making the object. So you do kind of have to sit these things, like babysit them. It's definitely not suggested that you would leave it overnight, even though you're running a 40-hour print. So you have to figure this stuff out. Similar to a kiln, right? It's getting more and more automated, but kilns historically, it's like you don't just leave your kiln, So that's something to be said too. Yeah, you kind of got to watch these things pretty closely.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, we have a machine by Stratasys that costs $22,000. We can leave that one, but we paid for that. So yeah, we paid for that luxury.
They do show up and fix it too. So
and they do. They come and help. Yeah, people come and help us with that one.
If you can feel the pain of the price, then it does help out. I mean, to have a warranty and stuff, but.
Yeah. So the next resource I wanted to mention is lynda.com. Does anybody have a membership to Lynda here? So you guys are familiar. Lynda.com is really a great resource. If you can see up there, I did a search on 3D modeling, and I got over 5,000 results on lynda.com. So this is not just for 3D modeling, but you can pay $25 a month for an individual membership, and it's just month by month. But you can learn everything out there. You can learn all the Adobe Creative Suite. You can learn. It's endless. So, but software training. This is excellent software training. So, another good resource at a very reasonable price. So we're going to. Oh, that's okay.
Oh, that's okay.
We got one of you hold that up.
Okay. This happens a lot, yeah. Hold that up so we can see it. All right.
So we're going to back up just for a second to how our beginning, cool. Our beginning was.
Yeah, so I could talk a little bit about the research and development phase of kind of adding these technologies to an already existing digital lab. And what we were doing mostly in our digital studio, many of the things came off large format printers. Many of the outcomes for the students were two-dimensional. And I think the fanciest we got was, archival inks on some Epson printers so really adding this was a big leap, taking binary code and making it into objects. So we tried to go out locally in Pittsburgh and see, well, who's doing this work? What universities, what schools? Let's go see what their best practices are. And we identified that, At the time, MakerBot seemed like fairly popular, so we did get a few of these Z18 machines, and the print bed, it's fairly large this way, but it's really tall. So I was like, ooh, and I mean, we're in Pittsburgh, you know, Andy Warhol, go big or go home, or what, you know, so I was like, let's get a big giant print bed. But quickly we learned, we got 2 of these machines, and this is my story again, where if we had any issues within weeks even, they won't speak to us. You know, you can't even talk to anybody. We're like, oh, we're kind of alone with our machines. But my point is, we are using these now, and they're working fairly well. But you know, in retrospect, I'd probably say maybe maybe I wouldn't have got such large printer beds at that time. I don't know. It's like when I thought we did a lot of research. I thought we really were well thought out on it, and we're not totally disappointed we have it. But the more you get into doing this, you realize it's really hard to utilize. Many times it's hard to utilize the whole print area unless that environment is hyper controlled with temperature, proper filament temperature, so it all bonds together. These are truly, if you look at them, deposition modeling is almost like a glamorized hot glue gun per se. The head that this filament's coming out of looks very similar to that. And the distance it travels, if the bed gets bigger and bigger, it's hot when it comes out, it's cooling the whole time. If it's a long distance to get back over there, sometimes it doesn't want to bond because you went too far. So all these things are concerns and issues. So be cautious, you know, and really do your research. Yeah.
The other thing that we did wrong at that point was these printers just came out on the market. Like, they just came out. That was so bad. It was such a bad decision.
We wanted the shiniest one, you know. So.
Yeah, I know, the biggest and the best. But so right away we started having extruder clogs, and then the issue with that is that they don't want you to try to fix it yourself. If you open up the extruder, you void the warranty. So we sent back probably 30 extruders within the first 6 months. It was a nightmare. Just couldn't keep them from clogging. They kept clogging up. And yeah, and so there was new on the market. There's a lot of design flaws, and I'll probably talk about them a little bit later. And so after the first couple of years of our experience, I would encourage people to go small. If you're going to start out, go small. Go small. This printer right here costs $299, and it's really dependable, and it's amazing for the price. I don't work for the company, I swear. It's M3D, the micro 3D printer. If you do an internet search on M3D, and it's great because it's very user-friendly. It's small. It's got a 4x4x4 build volume, but you can do a lot with that build volume, actually. And
we carried it on the plane with us.
Yeah, and
As a carry-on,
that was why we bought it.
Yep.
We bought one just so that we could carry something and take it places like on a plane. And so I did a little bit of research and found out that I looked up best printers under $1,000, and this, surprisingly enough, came up at like the top of like 3 different lists out there of reviews that were written. And so I was like, what do we got to lose? $299, you know? And then they have blemished ones for $250. So it's awesome.
Same warranty and everything. Yeah, so it's like, really accessible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's been very easy to work with, and I really love the little thing.
What did you make with it?
What's that?
What did you make with it?
Oh, we've been making some extruder dies, and we printed. There's on the table over there. We actually have some busts with Voronoi patterns on them, the holes. So some little busts. I've printed a bunch of busts on these.
What did you use for software on there?
So I'm getting to that. I'm actually getting to that.
That's a great question.
That is a great question. So the reason I pulled up the MakerBot software is because if you're just starting out, so first of all, let me explain that the software that you model in does not send the model to the printer. You model it, then you take the file that you model and you put it in slicing software to send it to the 3D printer. And so this is MakerBot's slicing software. It's called MakerBot Desktop. Yeah, thank you. So as you can see, there's a lot of parameters that can be changed. They do have presets, low, standard, and high, and that's just quality. So the higher quality means thinner layers, so it's going to have a smoother surface. So there are presets that you can use, but if you ever make any modifications to the printer, and you will, it'll happen, you need to know how to work with the parameters in here and how to tweak them for any modifications you make. So the software can be a little daunting. Cura is another slicing software. It's actually used for print bots, for Ultimakers, for Lulzbot. So there's a lot of manufacturers that the Cura software, they have a lot of profiles for many of the 3D printers out there. But it's also, there's pages and pages of options and things to tweak if you do make any changes. So this is the software that comes for the M3D. Now you can use more complicated software and communicate with this if you're more comfortable in Cura, but this is the software that they give you. And look how simple it is. It's so user-friendly. So I mean, if you're gonna start out simple, you know? I mean, and if maybe you wanna do some of your own, maybe you wanna print some of your own tools. You know, you can design ribs, you can do extrusion dies, you can do stamps and things like that. So if you decide to incorporate something like this into your studio, I would suggest starting with something like this. And the software, like I said, is very, very straightforward. It's not complicated, and it's a great way to begin. Oh, and it's self-calibrating and self-leveling. Not all printers automatically do these things. So, you know, some of the printers, like on the Ultimakers that we brought last year, you have to manually level the bed every so often. And so this takes care of all that on its own. You don't have to do that, which is nice. So there it is, $299, and
We don't work there.
you can color coordinate.
Yet, until they see this, then they'll be like, whoa, you guys are awesome.
Yeah, and you can pick a color to match your studio or your classroom. So yeah, they're sweet. And they do make one that's a little more expensive and a little bigger, a little bit fancier, but it's still pretty small. So the last thing we're going to talk about is our
Yeah,
outcomes.
sure.
I'm a neophyte to 3D printing, but I'm reasonably competent with the computer. What kind of learning curve am I looking at if I take on one of those? Is it going to take me an hour, a day, a week to figure out how to make a extruder die?
It's gonna take you about an hour.
What?
I don't know anything about it at all, and it's taken me weeks to learn how to draw in Rhino, and lots of money, but I showed the same thing I learned to my students, and they learned it in an hour. Because they have computer skills built in.
It is true. The kids definitely,
Learned everything I learned in an hour.
they go much faster than we do.
And I've been with lots of workshops that cost me lots of money, and I've been doing some designs of my own, and I've sent some files to places and had them printed and used them for sculptures. And when I went to teach what I knew to my students, they learned it in an hour. It just was very weird.
Yeah, that seems like people that, yeah, well, depending on how savvy you are with technology, that's for sure, there's a different, but with this, I know, you know, if using the proprietary software along with a piece of equipment like this, I would think, you know, you probably have a successful print in a few days at the longest. You know, it's not, I don't think a week, for sure.
Yeah, no, the printer and the printer software is really simple. It's the 3D modeling can get a little challenging if you haven't done modeling yet. But, you know, for things like extrusion dies, this is just 2D drawing that's been extruded to make it thick.
So yeah, so
So
respectfully,
these are
yeah.
pretty simple models, really, very simple.
So just respectfully for time, real quick, we will take questions. Let me, I just want to finish this part up real quick, and then for sure, we're happy to, however long they'll leave the mic on, we'll talk. So, let me just share with you the engagements that we do. I don't know if I mentioned, but we're working with 9th through 12th grade age students, so high school age. And there's kind of an arc of learning that happens in all mediums, and that's true for this digital medium as well. And we summarize that through 3 words: learn, create, and celebrate. So, and we feel that these things are equally weighted, like 33.33% important. So, learning, obviously at a world-class level, and how we define that is that we're trying to parallel this learning with what the students will find outside of our walls. Like when they go out and do an internship, into higher education, into the job market, they can take the things they learned at Manchester right into those realms. So that's a world-class experience by definition to us. So every 10 weeks we have these experiences. The learn, the create, the hands-on tactile, wonderful things happen, and celebration happens. And that's critically important. And we know in ceramics, as you know, many times, it's like the pot's still warm coming out of the kiln. Well, if that happens, it does, we have to reevaluate and say, well, wait a second, we wanted to make tea and drink it out of that teapot. We wanted to use that vessel. And you know, that's really, it's very purposeful. Like our engagements are to take time to give the students a voice through these experiences. So that all happens in every realm as well as the digital. And that's what you're seeing here is students signing up for these opportunities that happen every 10 weeks in these mediums. And here's a student down here in the corner that's you know, sharing out and demonstrating what she learned in that 10-week course.
Yeah, so some of the other things that we've done, this is a class that I taught last year. Dave came up with the title, Hey, What's Your Problem? And so what we did.
I was just saying that to you.
I know.
I just didn't, that wasn't.
So, but the gist of the course was that we were going to find solutions to real world problems. And so kids were making everything from, like we started out, I said, okay, let's make earbud holders so that when you put your earbuds in your backpack, they won't get all tangled up. And so the kids designed all kinds of interesting little flat ones and things where the earbuds actually went in these little holes, and then there was a place to wrap the cord and put the end. And so we got all kinds of interesting little results with that. And then they did things like some of them created little shelves to put like charging stations for their phones. And then at the end of the course, I actually had a challenge that I told the kids, so see the MakerBot sitting on the counter? I don't know if you can see where the filament is hanging on the side. Well, really, the filament holder for the MakerBot, the Z18, is under the print bed all the way at the bottom of the printer. So think about this for a minute. It goes inside, it goes up the front corner, across the top, back this way, and then it gets to the extruder. And the extruder just has an itty-bitty motor in it, right? That's running this. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. So yeah, maybe it worked for a little while, but then we just kept getting filament jam, filament jam, filament jam, filament jam. And I was like, holy crap, let's get it out of there. Let's get it out of there. And so it's hanging by a coat hanger up there right now in this picture. So I said, come on guys, you need to work in teams and you're going to design a filament holder for the Z18s. It's a competition, there's prizes, and so you see the kids measuring and doing their sketches, and so they actually, literally, I had them walk through the engineering design process. I didn't call it that, but that's what they did. So they had to write down words describing what the result should do, like what the actual filament holder should. Some of the qualities it should have. It should be snug. It should not be big. It shouldn't be. It should just it should be able to run the filament smoothly. And so they start with words, then they start with sketches, and then they actually begin taking measurements and doing the designs. And so here's the winning filament holder and the winning team down below who designed it. And to this day, they are working great. And it's so awesome that we can tell people our kids solved this problem, and you know.
Did you tell MakerBot?
I didn't.
They won't answer.
Yeah, they won't answer. They don't like us. Yeah. Oh, so, but anyhow. Huh? We should, yeah.
MakerBot can be good though. I'm not trying to, you know, this is all, I think, a challenge that's kind of across the board, so there's no,
Another thing that
yeah.
the bed doesn't stay hot.
Well, ours don't have heated beds. Our MakerBots don't. Well, maybe our Replicator 2 does, but not the Z18. I don't think it's not a heated bed. Yeah.
So
it's a closed
this
cabinet.
Is the only design flaw on this one, but they at least they have this on their website to download. So they had the same thing. The filament can get loaded in here. It runs around, comes up. There's just too much friction, too much drag. And so, same thing was happening. I'd get a little bit of a print, and then it would just stop extruding because it just couldn't pull it. It couldn't pull the filament. So I downloaded their holder, and it runs great like this. So the other thing we did is we're fortunate enough to also have a laser cutter and engraver. And Autodesk married these two things together wonderfully in two of their free programs. So we make bowls with our kids. So they model them in 3D first. And I'm going to show you the process really quickly since we're running a little bit over. So the way this all begins is that you start out in Illustrator. And the kids get to learn a little bit about what a path is and what points on a path are. They can add points if they want. And then what they do is we add an effect, and it's all based on the number of points. So this is a pucker or bloat effect that we use here. And so this was the pucker. And if you have more than 4 points, you'll have more puckers, right, when you're done. And so if you save a file in Illustrator as an SVG, you can take it into 3D modeling. So there's the 2D drawing that was made in Illustrator. Made a copy of it, Control-C, Control-V, drag the second copy up above, shrink the bottom copy, and then in 3D modeling software, you can loft from one shape to another to create a solid. And then you can shell it and decide what the thickness of the walls is going to be. So there's your 3D model, okay? And then, I don't know if you can see the menu, because I have other Autodesk applications installed, you can send to the other applications. So 123D Make is listed there, and then it comes into 123D Make, and then you can choose how to slice it up for cutting out on a laser cutter and engraver. So this is stacked slices. And then you can print out the plans. They're in EPS form. So because when you work with a laser cutter and engraver, you either are using CorelDRAW or Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator, to send your files. I mean, you can Photoshop too, but those are the two main programs. So then the student has the option to put it together however they choose. So this was like a gradual twist. Here's some other 3D models that have translated to the laser cutter and engraver. So we have a light bulb shaped lamp and a bowl with bloats instead of puckers. And they were alternating the way they made it. Here's some of our students with bowls they made. So these were great. And then we did a retro game design class too. That one just ended. And so the board was all done in Illustrator. And 123D Design, they made their game pieces in 123D Design. We had chess boards. You guys recognize Fallout Boy? So this is a Fallout Boy chess set that some of the kids made, and the laser engraver did the chessboard. And then last of all, we've already talked a little bit about this, but
Yeah, some of the things we did, we were lucky enough to we had Brooks Oliver come as a visiting artist last year before NCECA, and he brought some of the things he's doing. He does all his models in 3D virtual world, and then he prints those in plastics, and then he casts them and then uses those molds to translate to ceramic. Something else that he was also sharing were some of these like press molds, and then we started making stampers, like, you know, there's a signature stamper there. So my hands aren't really that dry, I think, yeah. Yeah, but, and then well, we did this with our students, but Brooks Oliver, an artist that was actually at the Archie Bray at the time, came to work with our students as a visiting artist, and he utilizes the 3D technologies in, I think, most of his artwork. A lot of stuff that's on display here, he's upcoming artist for this year, so he has a display over in the space over there. And those objects, all his vessel forms, the flower vases, and all, those all came from a 3D design originally. And he'll be speaking about that as well with his tomorrow, I think, at his talk. Yeah. So, keep going. And then this is just another extruder die, concept. And these work very well. It's interesting if you work with extruders. We have like wood dies and metal dies and all kind. We cut ones out of Lexan. And interestingly, this translates well where when we use them, it does create a really nice surface quality. And I attribute it maybe to the thickness of it, because we're making them fairly thick so they're strong. But I think that's helping align a lot of the particles, because it's almost going through a small shaft, not just a really shallow die. The metal dies are so thin, sometimes I get a lot of curling. So these seem to work very well. Yeah. Yeah, they can be any. I mean, those weren't as unique as, you could take it to the moon.
Each student can have their own design.
Oh yeah, and then also we haven't yet, but printing the ones with the central to make like cylinders, and imagine, because you could just print bridges, and I believe that this material, ABS and PLA, are strong enough to do that. I believe it would work. Yeah, so you can have like the ones with the centers in them, if you know what I mean, printing like pipe forms and things. And here's another example. We threw peanut butter cups in the laser engraver, and we zapped them, and for like, just for fun little stuff. And if you post stuff like this to Instagram, you get a whole lot of likes from like wedding planners, and you're like, whoa! I mean, they should have gave us money for this. They're like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. I was like, oh, well, we had fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, please, if you want to find out more, that's our website. Please, go on there, check it out. We're also on Instagram, and we are a nonprofit organization that survives 12 months at a time. So somehow, if you guys all like us on Instagram, it can only help that we have more followers, more. You can see the wonderful things that these inner city kids are doing with the arts. So we'd love that. So please follow us if you could.
And we'll see you in Pittsburgh next year.
Yep. Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Yep. So thanks very much for being here. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time. And then we'll be taking questions. You're welcome to. We're not trying to hold anybody here, though. So thanks so much for staying. I know we ran over.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Can I ask a question? First, I want to say, years ago, I taught at MCG.
Awesome.
Many years ago. So
Sure.
we just thought it was right, and it's not really working. It's just we can't figure out the ratio of clay into the nozzle. Did you have problems?
We're not. I definitely think that's I'd like to talk to you about that for sure. We haven't built, or we haven't tried to do ceramics printing yet. Just because we try to, like I said, we're trying to do world-class engagements for sure. So we're trying to do everything in moderation and make sure we can have successful outcomes. Some of the major goals we had with this technology was, one of them were to make sure that every student could leave, like we have 1 to 8 student teacher ratio, so those 16 students would leave with multiple 3D printed objects every 10 weeks. So we tried to minimize a few of the variables. So we're trying to print in mostly resins and plastics, but definitely a partner of ours, West Virginia University, they're doing they have quite a few 3D printers in clay, so I'm sure that, Shoji Satake and Jen Allen at West Virginia University, I could definitely get you their contact, and I'm sure they'd have answers and some advice, as well as others here. I know I see quite a few clay 3D printers, so I'm sure they have a lot of knowledge, but we haven't breached that yet.
So Western University,
Oh, thank-
Pennsylvania?
No, West Virginia University. Yep, WVU.
All right. We go.
So any other questions? Or?
Okay.
Cool. Well, our table's right over there. So if you want to talk about anything we spoke about, we're happy to do that. And thanks again so much for being here. We appreciate it. Thanks.